The winter that year felt longer than any before it, not just because of the cold but because of the silence it brought with it. Streets that once echoed with laughter and arguments alike now lay muted, as if the city itself was holding its breath. For many, life had narrowed down to survival, counting coins, counting days, counting the distance between hope and despair. Among them was Ayan, a man in his early 30s who had learned how quickly stability could dissolve. One month he had a job, a routine, and modest dreams. The next, he had a letter of termination and a small apartment that felt far too quiet. Ayan woke every morning before dawn, not because he needed to, but because sleep no longer came easily. He would sit by the window with a cup of weak tea, watching the sky change color, wondering when his own life would shift again. He sent out applications daily, each one carefully written, each one carrying a quiet prayer. Most went unanswered. The few replies he did receive were polite rejections that ended with phrases like, "We wish you the best," and, "perhaps in the future." The future felt distant and unkind. Down the hallway from Ayan's apartment lived an elderly woman named Safia. She had lived in the building for decades, long enough to remember when the walls were freshly painted and the stairwell smelled of new cement. Time had bent her posture and softened her voice, but her eyes still held a sharp awareness of the world. She noticed things others overlooked, like how Ayan's shoulders slumped a little more each day, or how his footsteps grew slower when he climbed the stairs. Safia lived alone, her children scattered across different cities, busy with lives of their own. She spent her days tending to small rituals, watering plants that barely clung to life, folding and refolding old letters, and cooking simple meals that reminded her of better times. She did not have much, but she had learned long ago that kindness did not require abundance. One evening, as Ayan struggled with the lock to his apartment, his hands numb from the cold, Safia opened her door. She held a small bowl covered with a plate. "You look tired," she said gently. "I made lentil soup. It's too much for me alone." Ayan hesitated, pride rising instinctively. He had not asked for help. But hunger had a way of softening pride, and something in Safia's eyes made refusal feel unnecessary. He accepted the bowl, murmuring his thanks. The soup was warm and fragrant, and as he ate, he realized it was the first proper meal he'd had in days. That bowl of soup became a quiet beginning. Safia did not ask questions, and Ayan did not volunteer answers. Some evenings she would offer bread or tea, and sometimes they would sit together in her small kitchen, sharing stories that circled gently around pain without diving into it. Safia spoke of her youth, of a husband who had been kind but gone too soon, of raising children during times when money was scarce but community was strong. Ayan listened, feeling something loosen inside him. Outside their building, the world remained heavy. Shops closed, neighbors moved away, and uncertainty hung in the air like fog. But within that small apartment, there was warmth. Safia never framed her gestures as charity. She spoke as though companionship were a mutual exchange, and in doing so, she gave Ayan something he hadn't realized he needed, dignity. Weeks passed, and Ayan found himself helping Safia in small ways. He carried her groceries, fixed a flickering light, and taught her how to make video calls so she could see her grandchildren's faces. Each act felt insignificant on its own, but together they formed a rhythm that made the days feel less empty. One afternoon, as rain streaked the windows and the city seemed to dissolve into shades of gray, Safia asked Ayan about his dreams. The question caught him off guard. He had spent so long focusing on immediate needs that dreams felt indulgent. After a pause, he spoke of his love for teaching, of how he once imagined opening a small community center where children could learn without fear of failure. Safia smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Hard times don't erase who we are," she said. "They just test how much we remember." The following week, something unexpected happened. Ayan received a call, not for a job he had applied for, but from a community organization that had come across his resume through a referral. They were looking for someone to help with evening classes for children whose schools had shut down temporarily. The position was part-time and modestly paid, but it was work that mattered. When Ayaan told Safiya the news, she clasped her hands together, eyes shining. "See," she said. "Light finds cracks." Ayaan began teaching in a small, borrowed space, using donated books and mismatched chairs. The children arrived shy and uncertain, but their curiosity bloomed quickly. Teaching them reminded Ayaan of his own worth. Each lesson restored a piece of confidence he thought he had lost. As he grew busier, Ayaan worried he might not have as much time for Safiya. But she waved away his concerns. "Go," she insisted. "Carry the light forward." One evening, after class, Ayaan noticed a young boy lingering behind. The child explained that his mother worked late and that he was afraid to walk home alone in the dark. Without thinking, Ayaan offered to walk him part of the way. It was a small act, barely an inconvenience, but the boy's relief was immediate and profound. Word spread quietly about Ayaan's kindness. Parents began to trust him, children sought his guidance, and the community center slowly became a place of refuge. None of this felt planned. It felt like a natural extension of what Safiya had shown him, that kindness was less about grand gestures and more about presence. Winter began to loosen its grip. Days grew longer, and the air softened. Safiya's health, however, started to falter. She grew weaker, her steps slower. Ayaan noticed the change and stayed close, checking on her daily. One morning, when her door remained closed longer than usual, he felt a surge of fear. Safiya was taken to the hospital that day. The doctors spoke in careful terms, explaining that age had finally caught up with her. Ayaan sat by her bed, holding her hand, feeling helpless in a way he hadn't since losing his job. When she woke, she smiled faintly. "You came," she whispered. "Of course," he said, voice thick. She squeezed his hand. "Promise me something," she said. "Don't let the world harden you. Keep doing what you're doing." Safiya passed away a few days later, quietly, as though she did not wish to trouble anyone. The building felt emptier without her presence. Her door remained closed, her plants unattended. Ayaan felt a grief deeper than he expected, but within it was a steady warmth, a gratitude that softened the pain. At Safiya's small funeral, only a handful of people attended. Ayaan stood among them, listening as neighbors shared brief memories of her kindness, a meal offered, a listening ear, a word of encouragement at the right moment. Each story was simple, yet together they painted a portrait of a life that had mattered deeply. In the weeks that followed, Ayaan found himself continuing Safiya's rituals. He cooked lentil soup and shared it with neighbors who were struggling. He left small notes of encouragement by doors, fixed things without being asked, and listened more than he spoke. None of it brought Safiya back, but it kept her spirit alive. Spring arrived fully, bringing with it unexpected opportunities. The community center received funding, enough to expand its programs. Ayaan was offered a full-time role, one that allowed him to shape the space into something closer to his old dream. On opening day, children filled the room with laughter, their voices echoing against freshly painted walls. As Ayaan watched them, he thought of that first bowl of soup, offered without judgment or expectation. He realized then that the light that appeared in hard times was not sudden or blinding. It was quiet and patient, passed from one person to another through ordinary acts of care. Life did not become perfect. There were still challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But Ayaan faced them differently now, with the knowledge that even in the darkest seasons, light could be created, shared, and multiplied. On a warm evening, months later, Ayaan stood by his window, watching the city glow under the fading sun. The silence that once felt heavy now felt peaceful. Somewhere below, children laughed, neighbors greeted one another, and life continued in its imperfect, beautiful way. Ayaan whispered a quiet thank you, to Safiya, to the children, to the unseen chain of kindness that had carried him through. Hard times had not ended, but they had been transformed. And in that transformation, he understood a simple truth: light does not wait for darkness to disappear, it appears within it, steady and enduring, as long as someone is willing to keep it alive.